Rad-Ish. Welcome to Rad-Ish, the podcast where we spotlight people who shape counterculture and champion alternative ways of living through their passions.
Hello and welcome to Rad-Ish. I am one of your hosts, Katia Eaton. We are here in OT 301 in the Ventilator Bar. And we are joined today by Dr. Nourhan Bassam. She's a feminist, urbanist, architect, and author of The Gendered City and Woman After Dark. With over 14 years of experience in democratic urban design through placemaking and community center planning, she founded The Gendered City, the organization based here in Amsterdam dedicated to advancing inclusivity and democracy in the built environment. Her passion focuses on empowering women in underrepresented communities to shape safer, more accessible public spaces. I'm very excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for making some time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and for having me.
To start off, I would love if you could tell us a little bit about your journey into gender-sensitive urban design. Like, what experiences and emotions got you on this path to today?
Yeah, I think it was pure coincidence, I call it. But ever since growing up, I called myself a feminist, thanks to a very feminist dad. So I got introduced to the whole feminist literature, Simone de Beauvoir, everything. So I think this something of like gender equity has been with me all my life, but to have it in the field and to merge my urban self and architectural background with this ideas was pure coincidence, as I mentioned. So I got into Jane Jacobs' books, The Eyes on the Street, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, like many of the books that really, I would call it the first paradigm shift to think about communities and what about the people that we design for. And I think this is for the longest has been missed in design schools. You're not taught this way. So for the longest, you're taught that you know better, you are the architect, you can design for people and they will just follow. And I think this has been a bit, the first shift that I had, that maybe people know better, maybe they need to be involved in this process. And from these readings and understandings, I think I got into feminist spatiality as a science, and I was like, wow. So feminism actually intersects with spatial design and with city building. Of course, it was, and it is still very much not evolving as the way we hope it is or should be. But a lot of readings, a lot of theories has been there since the 80s. Dolores Hayden, What is the Non-Sexist City? And I was like, this makes very good, perfect sense. And I was a bit weirded as well out why this has not been more educated, more talked about, especially in the practice. So this is, I think, when I started 7 years ago, is how cities keep failing women. And this is very blunt question that I started to put out there, actually online and offline. And I was amazed that the amount of testimonies, I call them now human testimonies about the failures, and it's super intersectional, because I think this is the whole point of intersectional feminism and understanding very much the diverse backgrounds of people and who they are and their experiences. And to be honest, I resonated with most of them, like women changing their shoes to be able to run, changing their outfits, not being in certain places after certain hours, being restricted. And it was really annoying and frustrating, but this happens to me on a day-to-day basis. And many of them as well of different experiences, of different sexualities, caring, women with kids, with caring for people. And they were so restricted, and a lot of it has to do as well with how we design cities and keep on designing the built sphere and the domestic sphere. So it was amazing, and I felt really that I have to do something about it. And I think this was the start of me writing the Gender City book, but the start as well that I want to do everything in that direction. So all the design, all architectural, but as well streets and spaces in between with this feminist lens, gender-sensitive lens. So I think this is when I even changed the name of my firm. It was so small, only me, but at that time. But I called it the Gendered City, and I think ever since then it has been kind of the ups and downs, but kind of a calling that I cannot just put behind me, So I think it has been ever since like everything feminist.
Yeah, I think that is such a valuable and important lens to have. And I think I've really enjoyed just I subscribe to the Gendered City newsletter. And so I love reading the different ideas that you're putting out. And I think what's nice is the intersectionality of it, that having a feminist lens doesn't mean it's just restricted to how is our city not designed for women, but how that also like sheds light to the other priorities in the design of our urban spaces. And something I would love to talk about is your idea of pace making, kind of a play. You have a lot of good plays on like placemaking and rewording these terms to kind of call attention to what we're prioritizing in our cities. And what I liked about pacemaking is like reflecting on the pace that our cities are designed for. And right now in cities, it's very designed for speed and efficiency, and talking about who that's maybe leaving out and how our cities could look if we designed places for care and social connection. And something I really liked that you said when talking about like designing places for people instead of for machines, you talked about like speed as political. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that idea of how like designing for speed really is like a political force to reflect on.
Mm-hmm. I always say as well, rest is political. And if you are allowed to be in and loiter and linger in public spaces, and I think this is the first right we give up actually for safety and security reasons as women, to just linger. And I call it in the Women After Dark book, the right to stargazing, to go home safely or not go home at all. So just to be. And I think it started with how cities are being assessed into these indices and matrix that I would call very masculine and very male-centric, because it really values speed and efficiency. Some parameters like no certain violence reports in the police, and all of this, for me, like this, that didn't really make sense, because this is not really what I love about cities. So like this city is the first and the best city to be at, and that I go to the city or live in the city, and you can see that it is really measured differently than what people and what women and what many of the communities would assess. So if we assess like with well-being, belonging, rest, of course safety and security, but as well being very unapologetically the actual right to spaces. And we know that safety and security doesn't mean the reporting in the police stations, but it means a lot of just the right and the perception of safety, how it's different from the reports or the real safety indices. So I thought like all of these indices and matrix, I think as well, they need to change. So pacemaking and having the rhythm, and actually like the rhythms of care, because care takes a lot of certain rhythm and caring for kids and for elderly. So it is not about the fast and efficiency, but it's about actually the ability to have clean public sanitation, to have rest spaces, all of these elements that actually make spaces and cities, sometimes even the chaos, the vibiness of the streets, the social interaction, the being allowed to interact with your neighbors and with your neighborhood. All of these indices and paces of different communities, they need to be included into what makes a city or city branding, or what makes this city the best to live at. So I think all of this idea about creating pacing and paces that enable you to be and to just enjoy, and the enjoyment and to care. I think this is the whole idea of making like the rhythms and enabling rhythms and different rhythms. So it is as well super intersectional. So we're not saying that we are not planning for public transportation to be the fastest and more efficient. And this is, again, like it's not either or, this and that. And this is very important, because this is always like the backlash feminist design gets, that it is designing only for women, it's designing for exclusionary practices. But it is not at all that. It's about really understanding diversity and diverse bodies that we are at, and the diverse experiences. So it means enabling actually to and more like the plurality of different needs and experiences within the city. So I think it really gained momentum because we all attested that it's more than what indices are assessing cities as the most and the best and the perfect city to be at, and how actually it can enable people to be at their own pace is very important. So it's about pace making and about understanding as well that the whole hostility of architecture that we can see in benches and rests, and knowing that we need to enable for different paces, for different human experiences. So it's at its core, it's human-centered design. It just listen to humans more than the machine and the car, etc.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so important. There's so many, measurement is really important. Like gathering data and having like scientific research is really important, but I think we're seeing among many things that the indicators we're using are to like measure progress and success are flawed. And so re-centering it around human needs and what makes a city interesting and enjoyable to live in is really valuable, I think. I'm curious about this idea though of like conflicting needs of many different like a plurality of needs and this like conflicting needs paradox. Like how do you like recommend approaching designing spaces for conflicting needs? Like what is how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the dilemma as well of understanding or thinking that these needs compete against each other, and they actually can definitely go hand in hand and they can go together. So I think the core of feminist urbanism, as well as what we call it the feminist placemaking, even is the process of design and how it is more democratic and about understanding diversity. So it's not necessarily that everything that we have been doing was wrong, but it is acknowledging that everything we have been doing was only serving a certain group, and this is the whole point. So it's really about a change of perspective rather than just erasing and eliminating everything that we have been doing. So adding this perspective means that you are designing for caring for kids, for instance, plus going to work or going home in like the most shortest distance, etc. So this is why that even proximity in the 15-minute city or the X-minute city is actually working towards this understanding of the valuable of having even introducing care trips and the trip chaining. And trip chaining is the small interconnected trips that carers tend to do. So it is about understanding the time intervals of these trips and the currency of these trips. So it is really about as well knowing that it's not this or that. So it can go hand in hand, and it's about understanding more what are the people lived experiences are and how you can design for making it easier and with its own pace. But it's about understanding as well how certain bodies navigate spaces and how space is actually political in a sense, and it's about all of this power dynamics and social constructs as well. So it is really it is understanding that this actually you can grow from this plural diverse bodies rather than eliminating certain bodies just to design for some minority.
Yeah, I think it's that inclusion and slowing down. Yeah, doesn't mean that then the people who are, or the systems that are currently advantaged don't get to still exist. It's just including everyone.
Yeah, totally. This is why intersectionality, it is always the intersectional needs. So it really taps on age and different social classes, so different socioeconomic groups with different body abilities, neurodivergent abilities. So really, it is intersectional feminism. And I think this is part of like the whole stigma around feminism and then calling it the F word and how it can be exclusionary. But the essence of it, that we need to steer the wheel the other direction, because it has been in one direction, serving one group for the longest. And it is really steering the wheel in many aspects. So it is in the system, in the processes, and it's in the understanding. And the first step, as you mentioned, like always data and understanding, but gathering it with a gender perspective, with a gender disaggregated essence.
Yeah, and space for care and social connection benefits everyone. It's not just for women. But I'm curious, I was excited to read, I think on Friday or Thursday, you released an article about, or kind of critiquing universal design, which I think is really related to this conversation about this idea of like the invisible average user that cities are now maybe designing for, and how that can kind of lead to very homogenous, like maybe over-surveilled, maybe boring places, but also can lead to like exclusive spaces that are not designed with an intersectional perspective. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your work and how you navigate like kind of helping to translate between community needs and like city institutions. Like, how do you help combat this like universal design mandate to be more inclusive in how we're creating spaces?
Totally. I think recently I've seen this boom about universal design, that it can solve the whole inclusion issue and that we can include different types and stereotypes, but it really results in this more homogeneous, actually as well, cities that you don't even know where you are anymore, because this like prototype you can see anywhere in the world. So it is the less identity, the loss of place, the placelessness. So so I mean, I call it like, it is universal design is like this, a new term for the same old bias, for the same old, I would say, ways that really put us where we are at now. So I think it is really tricky too, because we know that it again involves capital, and in the capitalistic world, we know that it can save money, that you do just a certain design and you can sell it to everywhere in the world and anywhere, like market it as universal and can fit anywhere. And I think the whole point of designing with participatory processes, with the feminist perspective, the feminist placemaking, is about understanding that you can never copy and paste solutions. Design prototypes, so it's never cut and paste, never one size fits all. So I think the whole approach of assuming that a certain intervention, a certain design will work in some place and any place actually basically in the world is very faulty. And I think this is what led to exacerbating and regenerating inequalities, and especially gender inequalities. So it is again tricky, because it needs a lot of political will in institution and city, in the city actually, to be able to listen to this. Thankfully, and I'm so, I would say, optimistic, because here in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, it really gained momentum since last August with Lisa's murder and everything, and really they shifted the understanding that we need to do something differently, and maybe we need to think about different people navigating different spaces, and especially in terms of safety and security. But it is always, I would say, understanding. And I had another interview with Swala, like someone in the city of Swala, and he mentioned, like, what do you recommend we do differently? And I was like, I can never do that, because if I like recommended something that is super universal, or worked in Vienna or worked in Amsterdam, this means that we are regenerating the same mistakes. So it is really dependent on sometimes I say the certain street you are designing. It's a very small square, depending on who is using it, and understanding your community and their needs, and about observation and listening, and and it is really about a shift in perspective, because it doesn't need like this huge budget or like a very different way, but it's really a shift in perspective on even what the first step to take. And sometimes it's about really understanding and listening. And I think this process help you know and really connect to the people's needs and community needs, and to really design for the 99.9%. So it really taps on this duality we have of like consuming and producing universal generic prototypes. And we see that the one intervention will work in one street and it won't work the other, let alone in different city. So yeah, I'm very fearful of the universal thing, because it's gaining a lot of momentum, that it can solve the issues. And again, it's knowing that as designers we know it best, and okay, we listen to all of you. Now we know that we can be biased, but not anymore. So we are designing this new prototypes. But you can never put yourself in everybody's shoes, and this is why really gathering personal data and human data and about people is really necessary.
Yeah, I think it's related to the pacemaking idea of in our design itself, we need to slow down more to create that space. But I'm curious, I feel like cities are often criticized. I'm not sure if this is an international thing, but cities are often criticized for taking a long time to do things. And yet it seems like maybe the speed at which maybe they're jumping through the participation window could benefit from slowing down. But do you feel like it's just that shift in perspective of where we're spending our time? Because I know that, sometimes that's the critique is everything takes so long to happen. And yet it seems like we're not spending enough time on gathering the information that matters.
Yeah, totally. It is a really shift in perspective because I always say that it's not about the grand scheme of plans or the bigger plans or like these master plans. Sometimes it's really about lighter, quicker, cheaper, smaller interventions that you can start with by like even observation and asking and start with next week. So it is really about, and actually like it really gives the room for iteration and for knowing that it can be mistaken or like it won't work the way that you are designing it for. So I always say that you start with testing, and really testing is part of gathering these ideas and experiences and testimonies. So it is really the shift of perspective that participation needs to be this very timely process that actually turned out to be involving the same people over and over again. So sometimes it's really about finding people where they are, asking kids in schools, parents picking them up, and then starting with testing, and then in an iterative feedback and understanding how this, even a programming can help with this. So it is really about this shift of even participation, as I call it, like who says that participation is this city halls that are filled with same old men, very opinionated about things. Sometimes it's a walk in the park. It can be like really gathering even data in a technological sphere or like. Yeah, so it is really about, I would say that doing the same old ways will never lead to a new solutions. So it is really about maybe finding other ways and going out of our normal way and making it as creative, as diverse, as open to as possible. And then you can start by testing as well, because I'm very much against like is spending budgets and huge budgets in certain interventions and just mass producing again certain interventions while they're not tested or they are actually sometimes, and most of the time these iterations prove to be like faulty in essence, and just it's budget is spent, money is gone, and then the problem is still there.
Yeah.
So, it's totally about changing our ways and perspectives and our old ways to newer ones and testing them. It might work, it might not.
Yeah, I think having that more experimental, localized approach could definitely help with this trend that we're seeing of really homogenized city centers and spaces that look the same no matter where you're going. Yeah. We've talked before about Renee Boer's idea of like the smooth city and how like all these city spaces are just becoming identical. And I'm curious what you think are like the forces behind that. I mean, I think it's all really related, but I do think that there's, a danger in like losing culture and like loss of place in this identical appearance, and bringing that experimental localized approach. It seems like a very empowering way to combat that. But I guess like, what do you think about that trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, totally. I think it's really eliminating identities and culture and diversity, even if it sounds So I mean. In our work, actually, and even if we think of doing something with the community and art production, even murals, anything, it can never be done by commissioned artists. So it needs to be coming from the community within. So I think it's very important to, again, champion your people's powers and art and know that the value actually of creating a place that is usually protected, and when people feel they belong to a certain even art piece, it's more protected. So I always give this example actually of a research around an underpass with a mural that was commissioned by like a known artist that basically no one knows of, and people still and men piss in this underpass. And when it was a community produced mural and artwork in another one, it was way less vandalized, or men rarely piss there, because it feels something that it has been created by their friends or people they know of, and it felt like it's something that presents them and they belong to it. So I think that even in the smallest artistic interventions, it needs to be coming from within, and to champion actually differences, and to highlight that people have different backgrounds, cultures, languages, and you can champion it and amplify it to actually to achieve this belonging and the sense of the belonging to something. So I think it is really these. And again, like feminist urbanism is not about creating the sterile places that are all like very white and clean and neat. And actually it's about creating like this accountability from the community within, places that reflect who are these people and what are their understandings and dynamics and everything. So, and when you build this place, it became way activated, very social cohesive, and actually like sexual-based violence, gender-based violence shown that it's really reduced with this type of accountability and cohesiveness in communities, because we know a big part of it is a social part. And design, you can do with design many things, but to a certain extent. And the rest is actually about changing social dynamics and understandings in communities, of course. So it is about, and we see and we've seen that communities with high accountability, they high cohesiveness, people know each other and feel pride in their spaces, they would less tend to do a certain behavior.
Yeah.
So it is basically, it's basically about respecting, championing, and amplifying people and their differences. And I always say that I feel so alive and so much alive in Mexico City, in this chaotic market with sellers going around and people just hanging out, than in many places in the world that is just clean and neat and very put together. So it is really about amplifying who are the people and their own differences and how they just be.
Yeah, I think there's so much benefit from making spaces less anonymous and more like personal. And I'm curious if you have any advice. I think sometimes people can take their built environment as like for granted, or something that they feel like powerless in shaping. And do you have any advice? Obviously, I imagine it really differs depending on where you are, but do you have any advice for people on how they can take more like ownership or influence on their built environment?
Yeah, totally. I always even tell to women and girls attending the academy or everything that you need to do as well your own reclamation. So we need to like do a smaller protest, like a smaller back wave of reclaiming, and more of reclaiming and being in spaces and being in the space and reclaiming it. So I think it is both like your small like feminist activism or like feminism, and a smaller part of it is like taking back space. So I think a lot of value can be from this from being in spaces actually, and we know that representation really matters, and when people see like more of who they are represented in public spaces, they would be in that space. So it is really about like this again, like dynamic of back and forth with what has been designed and how you can reclaim it, and how you can and we have seen many examples around the world, like parking days and reclaiming a parking spot and being there and picnicking in it. And I think this is small interventions, but it really shows that and sometimes it can lead to longer term actions. So this is why I love grassroots activism as well. And I think that very much of these small actions can really build this, like they are super incremental, but it can build like this vision and I would say like change even of the political will into maybe transferring like this parking spot to a parklet or a smaller park for interactions. So I think, and it has been actually like done in certain different places around the world. So it is not impossible. So I think it really brings this, I would call the really grassroots activism from us into more reclaiming and more being in these spaces and to make it our own eventually.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So we have a question we like to end every episode with, and it's intentionally a bit of a hard question to give one answer to. But the question is, if you could change one thing, it can be at a city level or a global level, but to make the city or the world better, just one thing that you would like to see changed, what would it be?
I don't want to sound cheesy, but I think empathy and having empathy towards each other, because like it's very interesting lately, like we were in Vienna for the Feminist Placemaking Academy in the Gender City, and someone said like the eyes on the street, and you always talk about the concept of like place activation, but actually like whenever something happens to me, people seem like not to care, even in they are in the space. So I think there has been a big part of who we are as people, and for our social, actually as social creatures, as our social belonging always to people have been erased by time, by segregation, sometimes actually by design decisions of segregation into these compounds that are very far from each other. Only the machine, the car, is in the space. It makes more and more in bubbles and very disconnected from one another. So it really, even all of these concepts we are building, it really builds on the empathy and for the social connection of people, and to know that you have a certain role to do if there is a harm in public space or some woman is being followed or seeking help. So I think a lot of it has to do with who we are as people, to be more understanding of our differences and just to care for each other. And I think a lot can change from us caring towards one another and having this accountability, responsibility that togetherness is very necessary and important, and the togetherness has been, I think, lost for some time, and it needs to be regained. And you need to, and especially in gender equity, you need to know that you can do something to end sexual-based violence. Of course, mostly it is on men, because there is always this wave that women have to do all the work to end this. It is not at all. Like, it's mostly men that have to do all the work. But I mean, the togetherness and this social cohesiveness has been lost for the longest, and I think it can regain a lot of value of who we are as people and how we connect with each other and how we occupy spaces as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's cheesy at all. I think it's really like ties together everything we're talking about human-centered design and about like what we want to prioritize when designing spaces, and it's so related in how we want to be as a society. So I think bringing care and humanness and empathy back into it doesn't make it less scientific, maybe a little bit more complicated to measure, but much more important and with much better results. So I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rad-Ish.